So for the last month or so, I've been learning to play the touch guitar. So I want to talk about what I've learned so far, how it's going, what I'm practicing, and what has worked and what hasn't worked. So we're going to look at some specific touch guitar techniques that you could potentially apply if you play guitar or bass, and we'll also look at some more general concepts that you can apply to practicing on any instrument. So this project has been a blast so far. It's been really illuminating for me as a drummer. I've been a drummer most of my life, and so it's really exciting to be a beginner again and to be learning a completely different kind of an instrument. Now, the touch guitar is a little bit different than a standard guitar, and I have spoken about this before, so I won't repeat myself too much. You can check out my week 1 update for a little more detail. But for our purposes, or for my purposes, it doesn't really matter because my goal with this project is to learn more about melody, harmony, and composition. So theoretically, I could do that with any instrument. I got nothing against standard guitar. I love the way it sounds, but I'm glad I chose this one because this instrument actually might be ideal for drummers because it allows us to play very percussively, to take advantage of using 2 hands to play things rather than 1 picking hand and 1 fretting hand. So this kind of combines the best of both worlds for me. So in week 1, I have my first lesson with Markus Reuter. All these lessons are available on his channel for free. So every week we upload the entire lesson. There's a lot of information in there, but I'll try and go through this stuff fast. In the first week, we focused on technique. In this case, the way you play a note is quite simple. You just touch the string on the note that you want to play. But the hard part is the end of the note. So watch what happens on this release. If you're not careful, you get this kind of pluck sound. So a lot of this technique that Markus is teaching me is based around avoiding that sound. So there's all these like crazy muting techniques that we use. We want to get a really clean release, just silence at the end of the note. So in the last month, I think I've progressed with this technique a lot. I really couldn't do it at all at the beginning.
Yeah. No, you had to make the release first.
Oh. That's hard.
Yeah, it's super hard.
Now I would say I could do that a lot more consistently, but there's still times, especially when I'm playing fast for me, which is still really slow as a beginner, but there's still times where it gets a little sloppy.
Yeah, but this is good, sounds great. So you notice like your release has gotten like, I don't know, 50 times better.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Really great.
It feels a lot better now. So next, let's talk about this lateral motion. One of the core ideas of the technique that I'm learning from Markus is that the hand, in general, should travel to the note that you're playing. That sounds obvious, perhaps, but what we're trying to avoid is stretching our hands out too much. There might be a place for that on standard guitar, for example, and sometimes you can't avoid it here. So it's not like a thing we never do, but in general, we try and avoid stretching out the hands into uncomfortable positions because it introduces a lot of unneeded tension. It also helps us with a couple other things. One of them is the release of the notes. So as I mentioned before, we're trying to avoid this sound. And one thing that helps is a little bit of side-to-side motion as you're taking the finger off of the string. And finally, the other thing this helps with is that it gives us more room to accelerate, and the faster the finger hits the string, then the louder the note will be. Same concept applies to the drums. The higher the stick is, the more potential energy it has. So having a little extra distance to move is actually a good thing because I can play a louder note if I start 2 frets away than if I'm just at a standstill. So to practice this movement, we've got a whole family of exercises. First, we have what's called the sun exercise. That's where we just move up and down the strings. Then we've got the daughter exercise, which incorporates playing notes as we're moving up and down. There's 2 different versions of that. There's that one I just played, and then there's also one where you play both hands in the same fret space, alternating, and that sounds like this. That one's a lot harder. I had a really hard time with that at the beginning. I still find it pretty challenging. It's not my favorite thing to practice because it's so hard. But it is a good exercise and it's getting better. And to wrap up week 1, we looked at the mother exercise. And this is the mother of all exercises because it combines all of these principles into one simple exercise. It goes like this. this was really hard for me at the beginning, especially playing this 2-octave version. Man, I struggled. Yeah, that was a really big challenge in the beginning. So in week 2, we only introduced one concept, but it's a very important one, and that is this system of pentachords. So the term pentachord can mean many different things. If you look at Wikipedia, there's a bunch of definitions there. The meaning that we're talking about here is any sequence of 5 consecutive notes in a scale. For example, C, D, E, F, G. So what's great here is if we learn just 5 fingerings, 5 of these pentachord patterns, that will unlock the ability for us to play all of the 7 modes of a diatonic scale. So the 5 patterns are, starting with the brightest key, we'll play Lydian. And then if we flat the sharp 4 to the natural 4, then we get the Ionian pentachord. And then if we flat the 3, we'll get the minor. Flat the 2, we get Phrygian. And flat the 5, we get Locrian. And those 5 fingerings will allow us to play all 7 modes. There's only 5 because Mixolydian and Ionian are the same, and Aeolian and Dorian are the same for the first 5 notes of the scale. So the last thing to mention with these pentachords is that you've always got 2 positions or 2 shapes that you can use for each of these patterns. So what I showed you before is called the crossed position. That looks like this. You can imagine the crossed position like this. If my fingers are getting in each other's way, they're crossed and they can't pass each other. Uncrossed would look like this, where the hands can travel freely across the fretboard. So we have the same notes in the same range in 2 different positions. Now where this gets crazy is when you start connecting the pentachords. So for example, to create a 2-octave C major scale, one way to do it would be like this. You play your C pentachord, that's C to G, so our first finger to pinky covers a 5th, and then this instrument is tuned in 5ths. So if I go up to the next string, it's the same note as my pinky down here. So our next note would be A in this scale. That's G, then A, you could play with your first finger here. Now, since you're starting this pattern on an A, we can use the Aeolian pattern. So, and those are all notes that fit within the C major scale. And then the next note would be an F. So we play the Lydian scale, or the Lydian pentachord pattern. And there's our 2-octave C bracket. Now there's different ways you can play scales on this instrument. That's one of many fingering options. And I will confess, it's not the easiest one. In fact, I had a real hard time with this at the beginning because this is a very difficult thing to execute.
And then F, exactly, it's just a half step above. F, 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 right there.
I don't know where F is. No?
No, it's Lydian now. It's 1, 3, 1, 3, 4. The C with the 4th finger.
Oh, okay.
No, it's wrong. You've lost.
I've lost where I am. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a really difficult aspect for me about this instrument, but it is getting better. So I think there is hope. One of the things that I've found throughout the years is that I make a lot more progress on something when I focus on one thing and one thing only. Because when I try and split my attention between too many things, I don't end up making progress on any of them. And so by the 4th week, I was starting to feel a little bogged down. I wasn't really getting better at anything because I had so much to do, supposedly, on my list of exercises. So what we decided to do in week 4 is to go through and decide what the most important exercise for me to practice would be. And so we came up with one primary exercise that focused on a physical motion. In this case, we chose the mother exercise. And then I would have one secondary exercise to just spend a little bit of time on here and there to help me learn the theory and kind of like learn where the notes are and stuff like that. The result of that was tremendous because I made a ton of progress on that one exercise. Wow. Yes, it means I wasn't making progress on other things, but in the long run, it's way faster and way more efficient, in my experience, to focus on one thing at a time and get it done deeply and then move on to the next thing, rather than trying to focus on 10 things at once. So week 4 was huge for me. I focused on the mother exercise. Instead of 20, 30, 40 minutes at a time, I would practice it in sessions of 90 minutes, you know, like minimum 1 hour nonstop, with variations. So I am varying things like every 5 minutes I might move down a fret, or I might play a different rhythm. I might play eighth notes instead of quarter notes, or I might play triplets or quintuplets. I would do these weird rhythmic subdivisions just to keep myself entertained. But the point is that I'm maintaining this same kind of emotion for an hour and a half. And this is something I learned taking lessons with Mike Mangini. It's incredibly helpful for developing technique. So that's something to keep in mind. That's a general practice concept, is focus on one and maybe 2 things, but even 2 things for me is kind of a lot. And especially with my personality, I like to really obsess on one thing at a time. So yeah, week 4 was really productive. Probably my most productive week. So this has been a very technique-focused month, but I'm now starting to focus a little bit more on music, kind of like I did in the first week, but now with a lot more knowledge. I'm still not very good at it, but what is very cool is that I'm starting to be able to hear a melody in my head, a very simple one, and know where that's going to be on the fretboard, which finger I'm going to have to use, and where the note's going to be. And that's incredibly exciting for me. So if you look at the musical examples I'm playing these days, I don't think I am that much better than I was at the beginning in terms of the actual musical ideas that I'm producing. However, on the technical side of things, I'm in a much better position now to execute these ideas cleanly, even if they are simple ideas, which they are. That is what I've been doing the first month. If you enjoy the videos I make here on YouTube, consider supporting me on Patreon. Got a lot of perks over there, which you can learn about at patreon.com/Sean Crowder. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and catch you in another video.